One. Hey, Adrian, welcome to the NTM Growth Marketing Podcast. I'm looking forward to speaking with you today.
Well, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So let's start off, and I would love to hear a little bit more about your organization and your role at the company.
Sure. So the name of my organization is the Customer Leaders Institute. We recently rebranded. We were the Community Leaders Institute. I am the VP of Marketing and Community. I spent before working here, I spent the prior decade working in the community software space,
Mhm.
doing various roles, marketing, head of community, a lot of what you would call thought leadership and things of this nature. And before that, spent 15 years in the semiconductor industry in various marketing roles and web marketing and what have you. So the Customer Leaders Institute is an educational organization, and we're focused on original research and education for folks that are focused on a customer-centric look at the world. We're very much looking at how people can put the customer first and building on that in terms of helping people with resources and education and research to further their careers and profession.
What does the day in the life of a VP of marketing look like?
Oh my God. At least for our organization, because it's VP of marketing and community. So, we spend a lot of time on our content creation, spending a lot of time with my team looking at our content calendar, making sure that everything is planned. We try to plan 1 quarter ahead. So right now we're just closing on Q1, but we already have Q2 mapped out, and we're going to start planning for Q3 in a couple of weeks. Um, the reason I like to do that is that way we don't get caught by, I've been in other organizations and I've seen other people run into this where it's like, oh, we should do something for Halloween. And it ends up being
It's
like
October
October.
30th. Yeah.
Yeah, or October 16th, even then, right? And it ends
Right.
up like you never have enough time. And I know that certainly things happen. It's not to be set in the rigidity of um like, hey, let's just do exactly what's in the plan, but it's good to have those milestone kind of things. So we have broad strokes, like we know we want to do one research piece, a big juicy research piece per quarter. We have our quarterly magazine. We just released our Q1 magazine that just came out. We have our event schedule that we have, and then we're able to kind of color things in and kind of map things out. And then, obviously people, like, I have weekly meetings where we brainstorm for, things that come in. And I think that you need to have a bit of agility in your planning, but it's also not a good idea not to have any plan either. Because I've seen organizations where it's kind of all, um, last minute. So,
Right.
spending a lot of time doing the planning and working on that. And of course, leveraging relationships is a big part for me. Having been in the industry in a very long time, we're talking to people that want to share their education and give an opportunity to give back to those up and coming professionals. So it's an opportunity for them to engage with the new leaders of tomorrow and kind of share their wisdom. So it's a very fulfilling role, and I really enjoy it a lot.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on what those brainstorming sessions are about when you're developing that content. And I think most importantly, great to create content, but how do you create content that actually is going to engage and, advance the customer journey process?
Yeah, I think that the thing that I've learned the most is the most important thing is to listen really careful to
Mhm.
people. You know, I know it sounds kind of obvious, but at the same time, it's the most obvious stuff doesn't seem to get done at the same time. So I spent a lot of time talking to people about what their goals and objectives are, and what do they hope, their dreams and things that they like to achieve, or what's missing. So what we'll do is we'll spend time and say, okay, um, my community manager, marketing manager will have those conversations with folks in the community. I have conversations as well. Our CEO will have conversations. We get together weekly and have a discussion about, did you see some interesting speaker maybe at another venue or event? Is there a topic that is of interest to you that you think maybe our audience would like a deeper dive on it? So, for example, we have an event coming up in April, April 18th, and we're having Greg Danes, who's known as Dr. Churn. And the reason he's there is because I actually saw him giving a really fascinating talk, but he didn't have enough time to go deep in it. But he was talking about why NPS is dead and why
Mhm.
you shouldn't rely on NPS. And he had all this data. Like, I think he had like 3,500 companies. He had done some deep research on it and basically showing that NPS had actually no impact if a customer was going to churn or not. And there are other
Interesting.
that you should be looking at. So I got a hold of him. I've been following him a while, and we had a good conversation. I said, "Hey, I'd like you to come on our platform and give a talk on this." And he was more than happy to do so. So I know that that'll be interesting to our audience because there's this like if you read any of the marketing newsletter, there's always like something like NPS is great, but then it's like, when should you actually believe in NPS? And as someone who's also been in support roles and done some of that work as well, I was kind of happy to hear that NPS isn't the end all to be all, because sometimes if you're somewhere and the NPS scores are low, you kind of like, oh, what are we doing wrong? And knowing that that's not the end all to be all is good. I'll reserve judgment so I can hear his full argument on it, but it was very compelling, at least to know don't put all your eggs in this basket.
You made a quick comment around marketing goals.
Sure.
I'd love your insight on how do you hold your team accountable to goals?
Yeah, so the way that we look at things is our revenue is generated from subscriptions because it's a membership organization that people join and they have full access to all the content and the research and things of this nature. So a couple of things that I look at. Now, I should also just say that we're relatively new as an organization, but what we look at is content consumption because we want to know
Mhm.
that people are consuming the content and are finding it valuable. So obviously we're looking at, people that are subscribing, people that are renewing. So obviously the churn number, although we only have like a year of data, so it's kind of hard to build that out. But we've started to see a lot of the renewals are happening, and actually the renewal numbers are quite satisfying. I think um, we're above average, so that makes me very happy. And as long as that continues, that's good for us. So we're looking at a combination of subscription renewal, new subscription, and content consumption. And as time goes on as well, we ask people how they felt about the courses that they're going at. So making sure that it was a valuable use of time. And also we spent a lot of time. I don't know if it's so much data so much as it's qualitative conversations. So like some of the shifts that we've seen rather than having longer pieces that are like an hour long, we're really focused on giving people these short 5 to 10 minute episodes. I call them episodes, but that they can kind of capture and shorten. And then the other thing, which I'm sure you've probably also realized maybe in your own marketing career, is people like to consume things differently.
Right.
So some people prefer video, some people prefer ebooks, some people prefer slides, some people just want to, read an ebook, although I guess that's less popular now. Um, so we're trying to also make sure that the same content is available in different ways. So I did an ebook on pricing psychology, but I also supplemented it with a 10-minute video that kind of covered the core basic principles of pricing psychology, which I learned over time. I worked in e-commerce for a while, and so learned a lot of the different tricks and tips. And I didn't mind sharing that with the audience because I think that's a good learning opportunity for folks that may not be aware of those things that we run into.
How are you consuming content these days? What's your preferred
Um,
method?
it's a combination of newsletters and podcasts. I mean, that's pretty much. It's hard. I mean, there's so many great books out there, and even myself, as having written a book, I want to. I have intentions to read books, but I get caught up in reading a lot of newsletters and things because I just think right now the world is moving so fast
Right.
with all the things that are going on. Like for example, to stay on top of what's going on in AI, right? Like if I was to read a book on AI, by the time the book about AI came out, it would be out of date. So I'm part of a lot of AI communities. I have AI newsletters that I'm reading. There's the AI Marketing Institute, the AI Marketing Institute or the Marketing AI Institute. I don't remember which or the other, but I listen to their podcast. They do like a weekly update. Paul Roetzer, and he does a really good job with that. They also have a really good Slack community. Keeps you really up to date on, um, like when Sam Altman situation happened, like the community
When the
was the best.
board try to kick them off.
Yeah. When they kicked them out, but that the community was like a really great source of they were sharing things, and everyone that's in very interested and invested in AI had very interesting insights that I wasn't really able to get anywhere else. And that kind of gave me a lot more real-time information. And obviously, when an event like that happens, you want to, be ahead of the curve to know, okay, do we need to make a strategic shift? Is there, have we put all our eggs in the open AI basket and maybe we should look at something else, or, things of this nature. So, I tend to read, uh, I actually, one of my favorites is Today in Digital. So I'll give a shout out to Todd Maffin. He does a really good job. I don't know if you ever listen to it, but he does like a 10-minute daily update of what's going on in marketing.
I'm gonna
Fantastic.
write that down. Today
Yeah.
in Digital. It's a podcast.
It's a podcast, and he spends it's 7 to 10 minutes. I mean, he's also a fellow Canadian, so
You're
but
biased.
I'm a, well, what I like is sometimes he actually what's really good is he does it from the point of view for US listeners, but sometimes he'll have the Canadian spin on things. So he may talk, for example, about TikTok and say, for example, there's no creator fund in Canada. So he'll mention, hey, we don't have one up here, but if you're in the States, here's the kind of thing that's going on. And there's so many times there are, as you know, marketing news moves so fast that at least it's good to have him kind of as a backstop at the end of the
Right.
day. If I'm preparing dinner for the family or something, I put it on, I kind of can listen and catch up and make sure, oh, I didn't know that Facebook changed the algorithm, or there's like a new rule for Google AdWords, or, because there's so much stuff that you can end up missing. And what's funny is between the network of all the newsletters and the podcasts, I usually get a pretty good overlap of coverage. Um, so,
I was
um,
on my honeymoon, and by the time I got back from my honeymoon, it was called Gemini instead of Bard, and so I was just disconnected for a week. It's like, oh wow, it's not even the same any name anymore. As it just moves so fast.
yeah, I mean, at the speed of where tech is moving, that's another one too. The tech meme ride home is also a fantastic one. I used to have a long commute from work. I don't obviously, I work from home now, like a lot of folks do. But tech meme ride home is also a fantastic. If you're in the tech or B2B world, I mean, he covers all the stories of tech,
Mhm.
and he kind of does like a rundown. It's also 10 minutes. As you probably noticed from a lot of my consumption stuff, it's nuggets, but I guess, that's just the nature of being an executive. You don't have time to sit and as much as you'd like to listen to an hour and a half.
Well, that's
Also,
why this podcast went from an hour. I thought it was Joe Rogan doing long form content to now it's 20 minutes or under for that exact reason. It's, a podcast to listen to on the ride to work.
yeah, I mean, I think the future of content is these snippets and things of this nature. Although, to be honest, I mean, on the weekend when I have more lengthy time, I'll listen to something like Revisionist History by Malcolm Gladwell. It's an hour, and but it's very hard. I have a young child; she's just turning one in a couple of weeks. It's hard to get through an hour's podcast.
Right.
It's not as easy as it was before. So that's why I appreciate the 10 minutes, because I can easily get a 10 or 20 minute podcast in. Oh, that's interesting. Add it to the queue. Same thing with the newsletter. It's
Right.
I tend to like these roundup newsletters, like the marketing dive one, CX dive, those types of things, which kind of give, um, even the newsletter we do is a roundup of marketing and community, which we do every week. And we pull from all the sources, and we kind of just bring in like the top stories that people may have missed. And maybe I was inspired by my own experience, but I try to get a more broader view, looking at anyone that would be customer centric. So it's not only focused on CX, it's also focused on marketing and community and social media. And I find even there, sometimes I'll read a story, I'm like, oh wow, that's a great one. I didn't catch that, because like you said, it can be, you blink for a second and a story slips through, and then you kind of feel like, what do you mean you didn't know this happened? you know?
Well, I have a few more questions, Adrian, before we head out for the day. The first one is around as a young organization figuring out your target audience.
Sure.
So I'll give this example of a film project that my friend was releasing. They thought their ideal audience was going to be, it was around trauma. They thought it was going to be trained therapists. Once they actually got it out there in the world, most of the consumers of the documentary were actually millennials and Gen Z, just normal people wanting to figure out their own trauma.
Sure.
So it almost shifted from a B2B to a B2C play once it was in the market. So which they got wrong, admittedly. But I'd love to hear from you. How are you trying to figure out that target audience as a new brand with not years of data and customer research and understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the reason we ended up having to change the name. We recognized that, we had to look at, okay, what's our model and how are we making revenue and who is the audience that we're attracting? And, certainly I have the bona fides of being in the community space, wrote a book about it, know a lot of people in the community. But as I was talking to people more and more about their career and their objectives and the things that they were looking at doing, it kept coming up about talking about customer and customer centricity. And then there started to be this overlap in some of the content that was happening. Um, and, I think, the dirty secret of marketing on a lot of things is sometimes things happen behind closed doors and people just kind of make decisions without actually talking to people. Like, you'll do a persona thing, like, oh, we're going to do personas, and we'll kind of sketch it on archetypes that we kind of know in our life, but we don't actually talk to them. And then we decide,
Right.
okay, so those are our personas. So I'm actually like to do the opposite, or rather start there, but then actually go do the research. So what we did is we built our personas, and then we went and tested them and chatted to people and kind of
With
valid,
real life people, not
yeah,
Google
with real life,
search. Awesome.
yeah, with real life people, and kind of said, hey, how do you feel about this? What was your reaction to it? And, I think the thing is, obviously I can't talk to thousands of people, but I'm confident enough that we made the shift, because I think the confusion that was happening is people were coming to the Community Leaders Institute and would see like marketing content or CX content, um, and kind of having a cognitive dissonance with the title of our organization. So allowing it to, or changing it to Customer Leaders Institute, allows us that leeway. And on top of that, it also goes with a story or a leadership that I've had in the industry, in the community industry for a long time, is I believe community is the front door to customer experience. And I really believe that, if you think about how people engage with brands just on social and just in general, it's all about people and connection and the way that they're sharing stories. And the first stop will be about this connection. Like, hey, I bought this brand new TV, or I bought this air fryer cooker and I want to learn recipes, but I don't want like the book from the company. I want to go on TikTok, or I want to talk with other people. What have they done and what are they building? And the companies that understand that and double down on looking at it from a customer point of view, I think are the people that are going to win against their competition. And the ones that don't get it and are kind of sitting in their boardroom and um, assuming things from archetypes without actually talking to people is where the mistakes happen.
So lastly, Adrian, can you share some websites, social media handles, best ways to follow up with you and your organization?
Yeah, so the best place to find us is mycli.co or the customerleadersinstitute.com, but it redirects to mycli.co. And we're on, I think mostly the best place to follow us is Customer Leaders Institute on LinkedIn, um, which brings also a good point, is knowing the channels that you want to be on. We're really focused on LinkedIn because I believe that to me is the best place to be on. I mean, we do have Instagram, like a lot of other organizations, but in all honesty, we spend most of our time on LinkedIn because that's where people are going now to
Mhm.
learn, level up their career. So that's the best place to find us.
Perfect, Adrian. Thank you for your time today.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.